Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. The first time I saw an image of a hydrothermal vent on ONC's interface, it struck me not just as a geological formation, but as something bodily alive and pulsing with deep time. It looked like a chimney rising from the ocean floor, but it felt like a seam, a rupture in the Earth's skin. I kept wondering what kind of memory resides in the ocean, what stories lies in its mineral and biological structures waiting to be translated.
So yeah, let's just click here. Then, yeah, there we go.
What does memory mean in deep sea context? These questions guided me through the entire trajectory of my ONC fellowship. It started as a curiosity, but soon became an obsession. I wasn't asking about memory in a metaphorical sense, but in a material, spatial, and temporal sense. I wanted to explore how memory might exist in systems where human consciousness isn't at the center. In the ocean, in geology, in infrastructures that build and decay. My research moved across fields, neuroscience papers, oceanographic maps, 3D models of vent structures, and conversation with scientists. I was working with information as much as with materials. When I was introduced to the hydrothermal vent system, these deep mineral-rich chimneys that form and erode on the ocean floor, it felt like I was encountering an enormous memory organ. They became the foundation of my practice during this fellowship, conceptually, visually, and physically. Much of my art practice begins with the body as a site of memory, not just the thinking mind, but the physical body, how it bends, collapses, repeats, ages, and carries. The vent system reminded me of this. They rise and break, pulse and cool, accrete and erode. Like bodies, they leave traces of use and time. Like bodies, they host invisible life, bacteria, heat, and memory stored in chemistry. That's when the metaphor deepened. What if you read these ocean infrastructures as bodily systems that carry non-human memory? This idea of a vent as a bodily archive became a hinge point in my thinking. From here, I began tracing deeper parallels, not just with the human body, but with the neural system inside it. Because both bodies and vents accumulate, hold, and transmit experience. Continuing from the bodily aspect of the vent, I came across the idea of the ocean as a deep mind, as I had already worked with the brain as a site for memory. To make the vent-brain connection more concrete, I just created a table that compares how activity and memory behave in both systems. In the brain, active neurons fire, forming memory pathways. In the ocean, active vents expel hot fluids, forming chimneys and ecosystems. Both are dynamic and formative. When neurons go quiet, they don't vanish. They remain part of the network and can reactivate later, like dormant memories. Similarly, inactive vents cool but persist. Under new conditions, they too can awaken and begin flowing again. Both systems are networks. The brain is dynamic, neurons rewire and shift roles. Vent fields also recognized, shaped by pressure, chemistry, and time. This helped me understand memory not as a fixed object, but as a living system, formed through activation, dormancy, erosion, and reconfiguration. This shift took me deeper into the material evidence of memory itself. This brought me to the idea of iron accumulation, a material phenomenon that emerged from these structural parallels. I was intrigued by how both the brain and hydrothermal vents use iron as a form of recording, a biomarker of time, presence, and transformation. In neuroscience, iron builds up in areas like hippocampus and basal ganglia. It increases with age in the brain. It tells a story of decay, stress, and memory loss. In diseases like Alzheimer's, iron deposition contributes to memory degradation. In oceanography, iron sulfide minerals like pyrite layer inside vent chimneys. These minerals store information about heat, fluid flow, and microbial life. They form geological memories, time layered into mineral strata. In both the brain and earth, iron becomes a residue of activity and accumulation, a record of past transformation. Memory, I realize, is not only cognitive or biological, it's also planetary. So I began to treat iron as a kind of cross-system sediment, a fossil of thought, a witness of transformation. This directly influenced how I approached material in my work. I began my first project inspired by a map of the Juan de Fuca Ridge. Through conversations with scientists like John Jameson, I learned about vast field of inactive hydrothermal chimneys, structures that are dormant but could one day reactivate. This idea prompted a shift in my approach. I moved away from making discrete objects and instead began constructing a site, an imagined excavation field, collapsed infrastructures of memory. This image shows my studio where I've been developing these projects. I installed looping pipe-like forms as the foundational structure for the final piece. Many of them bent, fractured, or broken. Some forms reference the body, while others recall vent chimneys or water pipes. Their fragmented nature stems from my understanding that these chimneys eventually collapse. I saw them as scattered pieces within a larger system, disconnected yet interrelated. The forms are arranged on a metal grid on the floor, resembling an archaeological dig or a dismantled network. One form in particular is scaled to the human body and suggests a folded, crushing posture. It evokes a state of holding, waiting, or reaching, a bodily gesture ties to both labor and care. To me, this piece carries a dual resonance, a figure that has collapsed, but also one that is attempting to recover something hidden. To craft the surface, I used scagliola, a traditional 17th century technique developed to imitate marble. It involves mixing plaster with natural pigments to create layers, stone-like finishes. I plan to coat all the pipe structures in this plaster using varying colors and patterns. To decide on these surface patterns, I drew inspiration from the sulfide color formations shown in the image on the right. The piece on the left was my response to that, an attempt to evoke the sense of layering and mineral buildup. In these pieces, I used iron oxide pigments in black, red, and brown. These weren't just aesthetic decisions, they evoke rust, heat, and mineral residue. The surfaces becomes a kind of skin, layered and marked by time. Some resemble sulfuric crusts, other bodily tissue or mineral scarring. In this context, Scalio allowed me to create surfaces that hold both geological and bodily memory, fusing the language of erosion, decay, and recovery. For the second project, I began a series of brass discs using electro-etching, a process that became deeply metaphorical for me. I chose this technique because it echoes the way memory behaves. It's time-based, it leaves traces, and it reveals itself slowly. I etched maps of sulfide and iron deposition from vent fields onto the discs, selected directly from scientific data. For the pieces I've created so far, I translated these maps into abstracted designs like the one shown on the left. I experienced with various permits to produce different results, intentionally varying the exposure time. Some were exposed for 3 minutes and 2 hours. Others were exposed for just 3 seconds. To carry out the electroetching process, I first applied a resist layer to the surface of the brass, as seen in the left image. I used the brass sheet as an anode and the steel sheet as a cathode. Both were submerged in an electrolyte bath, a mixture of water and salt. I then passed an electric current through the system. The exposed areas of the brass slowly corroded, revealing the design. Plate 1 was exposed for 3 minutes and etched over a 2 hours period, the longest duration so far. On the right, you can see the steel cathode sheet, which yielded an unexpectedly fascinating result. The image etched into the brass began to dissolve and was partially absorbed by the steel. In this way, the steel became a kind of memory of the brass's erosion, holding its ghost imprint. Plate 2 was exposed for 2 minutes and etched for 2 hours as well. As you can see, longer etching times result in more pronounced erosion. This process became a way to speak about deep time, invisible decay, and uneven memory. Just as bent structures shift over geological epochs and as neural pathways weaken or intensify over time, each disk carries its own rhythm of transformation. The resulting surfaces evoke neural imaging or biological samples on Petri dishes, which I have worked with previously. Each piece became a kind of memory fossil, inscribed not only with image, but with time, erosion, and chemical agency. I plan to continue this series with additional map-based design and forms inspired by iron deposition morphologies in the brain as well. Throughout this residency, I've been thinking about what it means to create systems, not just individual objects. I'm interested in making visible the infrastructures we often ignore, bodily systems that carry accumulated experience, ocean systems that record change, neural systems that embody memory. The hydrothermal vent field became a metaphor for all of these, but also something more. It became a thinking partner, a material site, a conceptual engine. I would like to share Peter Gottfried-Smith in his book of Other Minds. The mind evolved from the sea. Water made it possible. All the earliest stages took place in water, the origin of life, the birth of animals, the evolution of nervous system and brains, and the appearance of the complex bodies that make brain worth having. When you dive into the sea, you are diving into the origin of us all. What does memory mean in deep sea context? I still don't fully know, but I believe it looks something like a scar, a trace, a fold in the body, and the earth. Thank you.